The ayes are 66, the noes 54. Part 1 as amended will stand part. We come now to the debate on Part 2. This is a debate on clauses 6 to 20. Is some member seeking the call? Charles Chevelle.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Mr Chairman, this is the part of the legislation which deals with the actual setup of the Environmental Protection Authority, its membership, board provisions, its objectives, its relationship with the Minister. It includes Clause 7, setting out that the authority is to be a Crown entity, and it also includes Clause 11, setting out the EPA's objectives, and Clause 12, setting out the EPA's functions. Now, I mention those three clauses in particular, sir, because there are supplementary order papers lodged in my name which would amend each of them, and I would like to speak to the issues that each of those supplementary order papers raise. So we've already heard in the debate on Part 1 that this is not a comprehensive environmental regulator that the House is going to be debating the creation of. It is proposed, as the Minister has said, to give it later functions at a later date, further functions. And that'll occur, we're told, both by additional legislation and by ministerial direction. And we've already said, sir, that it would be much better if, rather than having this piecemeal adding in approach from time to time, if the Minister had brought to the House a comprehensive piece of legislation, because that isn't what's happened, and as a result, the law is left in a confusing and unsatisfactory state. And this is something that the submitters to the Select Committee pointed out time and time again. There were many other logical functions that ought to have been carried out by the EPA, and a couple were added in by the Select Committee. There was the ozone layer protection functions and the import-export functions formerly carried out by the Ministry for Economic Development. But so much more could be done by this authority. The Waste Minimisation Act 2008 could have been brought within the ambit of the EPA. It would be a natural and sensible thing to have done, sir. It could be the body that would urge the Minister to get on with creating the product stewardship schemes that members on this side of the House would so love to see under that Act, so that we could have at last decent recycling, waste minimisation and reuse policies put in place in this country. There are many more additional functions under the Resource Management Act that could and should be carried out by the EPA. And we've already talked about the coastal and marine management issue and the exclusive economic zone. Now, like my colleague Brendan Burns, I take the Minister at his word. I know that he is somebody who wants to see the right thing done in this area, but I am concerned that it hasn't been done. I am concerned that the delay in bringing those functions into the EPA, while there is all the extra activity going on in our coastal and marine areas around minerals exploitation, will lead to a loss of public confidence in the new Environmental Protection Agency from the outset, because that body doesn't have any authority to deal with those issues. And as we heard from Sue Kedgley in the debate on the earlier part, that is a real problem. When people hear the expression Environment Protection Authority, they think that's a body that's going to be protecting the environment. But there are so few functions, Minister, that actually adhere to that authority from the outset that it cannot be said that that is what we are creating today. Now, sir, we've already talked about the manner in which the authority is intended to function. The Minister has taken functions away from other entities like IRMA. He's taken the has no function away and he's putting it into the EPA. Likewise, the Climate Change Response Act responsibilities will come from the Ministry for the Environment, and they'll go and otherwise, and they'll go into the EPA. What we'll have is environmental law by hodgepodge. The Minister will be creating under this regime a necessity, as I said earlier, to read with the EPA legislation the particular piece or pieces of other environmental legislation that are in question. And Sir, the other problem is there's this provision in the legislation, Mr Chairman,
Charles Chevelle.
that will allow the Minister to direct the EPA to carry out additional functions from time to time. Now, the assurance we've had from the Minister and from his officials is that these will only be minor ancillary functions. No substantive new functions that require legislative amendment will go to the EPA as a result of ministerial direction. It's a trust me, we'll do it the right way. I see the Minister smiling there because he knows that the problem here is there's just no bright line in our law between a substantive and an ancillary function. And I know that, or I anticipate that when the Minister takes a call, he'll point to some provisions in the legislation that touch on this matter. But it really isn't satisfactory that new functions should go to the EPA simply by political judgment and ministerial fiat. It should be the legislation that founds the EPA that gives it decent and comprehensive functions from the outset. Now, Sir, there is a supplementary order paper tabled in this matter. It would add in a couple of functions for the EPA from the outset. It would remedy the failure to deal with coastal and marine management as well as environmental management in the EEZ by putting those functions directly into those of the EPA right from the outset. Now, I don't pretend that that is a substantive answer. I accept that further legislation would be required in order to accomplish that fully, but the Minister's told us that he has a report, and this is an urgent matter. The drilling is happening. The exploratory licences are being granted. The public don't want to wait for a proper regulator and a proper body designed to be in charge of public consultation on these issues. They want to see that happening now. There's no reason with the constitution of the EPA by legislation that this House is now accomplishing that we can't do that. There's a separate supplementary order paper, Sir, that would also add the administration of the Waste Minimisation Act into the functions of the EPA, and I do commend those two supplementary order papers to the House. So the next point that concerns me in respect of this part is the actual function of or responsibility of the EPA. Now, when, as I said before, you hear the expression Environmental Protection Authority, the immediate thing that springs to mind is a body with comprehensive and independent regulatory powers over the environment. So the problem here is this body doesn't even have an express responsibility to protect the environment. Nowhere in the statute will that requirement be found. And that is why, Sir, I have lodged a supplementary order paper that will insert in Clause 11 of Part 2 an express objective for the EPA, which will be to protect, maintain and enhance New Zealand's environment. It's a crying shame that the Minister didn't think that overarching objective ought to have been inserted into the bill from the start. And the failure, in my view, to have done that speaks volumes about the commitment of this administration to the fundamental importance of protecting and maintaining the integrity of the environment. Minister, we must have something of that nature in this legislation. There must be a strong objective put in from the start. Otherwise, your work, Sir, will be in large part for nothing because of that public confidence issue that I referred to earlier. Sir, the final supplementary order paper that's relevant to this part that I have lodged relates to the independence of the Environmental Protection Authority. So there are three types of Crown entity under the Crown Entities Act. There's Crown agents, which have to give effect to government policy when directed under the relevant legislation by the responsible minister. There's autonomous Crown entities, which have to have regard to government policy. And then there's independent Crown entities, which can't be directed by the responsible minister unless there's an express power. Now, the problem we have here is that it's quite obvious that the legislation sets the EPA up as something other than an autonomous Crown entity. And in fact, in respect of some of the powers in the Act, such as the has no powers, that involves taking authority closer to rather than away from the Crown. Mr Chairman, I would...
Honourable Nick Smith.
Mr Chairman, I'm only going to take a very brief call to respond